Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Tales from the Tavern. I am GamerMomLuna, a writer and interviewer with Shadomain.com. I am a voiceover artist, AP player, and you may, by the time this releases, you may have caught me at PAX East, so I will be there as well. That's a little about me.
And I'm Jason, a writer at Shadomain.com and a TTRPG creator. This week we're here interviewing Dave Scott of Evil Genius Games about his experiences.
All right, Dave, we're excited to have you. Thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a little about who you are, a little about Evil Genius, and where people can find you around the internet.
All right, well, thanks, Melissa and Jason. I'm happy to be here. I'm always excited to talk about Evil Genius Games and what we're up to. We're certainly excited about what we're doing, and we're hoping that our fans can be excited as well. So hey, my name is Dave Scott. I'm the owner of Evil Genius Games, and you can find me around every single time you email customer service or you see a post on Twitter or any of this stuff. It's secretly me behind it, trying to act like we're bigger than we really are.
We hear that from a lot of people we talk to, actually.
Yeah.
What's funny is actually the larger we get, I still might do customer service because I actually love spending time with the customers. Like, they're so nice and such big supporters, and I learn a lot about how they're consuming our products. So you never know, I still may be customer service employee number one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it works the same way here for us. So, how did you get started in TTRPGs?
Many moons ago, when I was 11 years old, I went to summer camp, and they were playing Return to White Plume Mountain. And after I met I think it was the Griffin, I was sold on the game. And luckily, when I got back to 6th grade, a couple of my friends also discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and so we were able to form a party. And I've never turned back from those nerdy days of playing Dungeons and Dragons in the basement.
I love it. We had to laugh. You just mentioned that because we literally just ran a variation on that at our local game store not long ago.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me as like an 11-year-old, it was mind blowing. It was absolutely mind blowing, and I still remember it to this day. And it just blew me away.
That's awesome.
Great.
So Evil Genius Games has the Everyday Heroes game system. Tell us a little about how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously everyone starts at D&D like I did, but after you quickly become an initiate into tabletop role-playing games, you start to look at other systems. And I was enthralled by D20 Modern when it came out in 2002. And I always loved the concept of Modern. So even before that, I played Champions a lot, and I tried to convince everyone else to play Champions a lot. That was like my game. And then even after, fell in love with Spycraft and other games like that. And I got to the point where I actually enjoyed the modern day role-playing game, probably more than fantasy, and was always twisting my buddy's arms to be able to play those types of games. So when I met Jeff Grubb, who is one of the 4 original designers of D20 Modern, I was like a fanboy. I was a teenage girl with getting excited about Justin Timberlake or any of those folks. So at any rate, talked to him, asked him if I could buy him a beer, and he was like, "Sure, you can buy me a beer. Why not?" And we started talking about D20 Modern and how he came up, how he worked on it, what problems they were solving, and we talked about the fact that thousands of people still play the game today, even though it's based on 3.5. And at that point in time, Amazon didn't exist, and the cell phone was a very different product, and and just all the modern advancements weren't really there, and people were still adapting their games and adapting the rule set so that they could still play the darn game. Then we talked about how much we really liked 5e and how 5e really streamlined things. And most importantly, it resolved a lot of problems that 3.5 had, particularly in relation to D20 Modern. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got a crazy idea. Let's update it. And the first time I said that, he said, hell no. And then after a few beers, he said no. And then after a few beers, he said, well, maybe. And then a couple months later, we formed the company. And it's been a really, really fun ride. I mean, I cannot tell you that I'm a game designer. I'm just a fanboy who had the initiative to go ahead and do this sort of thing. But it was really fun working with the game designers and just talking about how we would re-envision this game and how we think about it in a new environment and how we could use it as an inspiration for what you now know as Everyday Heroes. It's been a really fun journey.
Nice.
That's great. So Everyday Heroes, as you just mentioned, is based on some of these other core game systems. So can you explain any of those dependencies, and does that affect the game going forward?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of designers who are much smarter than me about that. And so while we use D20 Modern as an inspiration, while we used 5e as an inspiration, they actually wrote the game design sort of like bespoke. So there's not a single copy and paste from any of those rules. We never sort of took any of those rules for granted. We always said, does this make sense? Does this approach and structure make sense? And in some cases it didn't make sense, so we didn't bring it in. In some cases we did.
Right.
Part of my mandate for creating this game is like, let's make it 5e compatible, because we think that there's a lot of customer base that would prefer to be familiar with the system. I mean, that's really, really important for me. When someone introduces me to a role-playing game where I'm not familiar with the system, I personally don't enjoy it as much. So for me, that was a requirement that I wanted to be able to understand at least the framework before I played. So that was one of the rules. But there were areas where we just simply couldn't use the same thing. So for example, we don't use AC because I didn't want people to run around in armor, old-timey armor, going, I'm deflecting bullets. No, I've never seen an action film where that's the base. In fact, it's funny because we watched a bunch of action films, and in most modern-day action films, they're wearing like a t-shirt and jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're running around like that. Like they're not even wearing bulletproof vests. So we said we have to create a system where, AC worked in a scenario where people were running around with like t-shirts on. So we came up with this concept of defense, right? So we didn't really sort of copy and paste, we really re-envisioned everything so that we can make this blockbuster action style game sort of work.
Right.
That's really awesome. I was just thinking about, like, the minute you said, like, running around in armor deflecting bullets, I had this really great mental picture of, like, this crossover, like, Steiner from Final Fantasy IX running around in like modern times in his arm. I was like, the image that just came into my head, just golden.
Yeah. It happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of adventures for Everyday Heroes based on well-known properties like The Crow, Escape from New York. How are you able to get licensing for that? How did those come about?
Yeah, so listen, we could have created Everyday Heroes, sent it off, and we could have created supplements like D20 Modern did, like Apocalypse or Dark Matter or stuff like that, and create our own worlds for it. And then you could have been playing an adventure in New York, or faux Seattle, or Metropolis. But I'm a huge movie buff, and I love, and every time I walk out of a movie, I'm like, there's so much more story in this movie. And so they built this entire world and world Bible for a 2-hour thing. And like there's more stories to be told here. And so I said, why don't we just sort of see whether or not movie studios are open to the idea of allowing people to tell additional stories. And so my background is I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is my 4th startup. And in my last startup, I created a product called Laughly, which was an on-demand comedy streaming service. So I started building relationships with movie studios and talent agencies from there. And so that was a natural way for me to start having these types of conversations. And it was funny because they just had no idea what I was talking about. They're like, wait, hold on. You're around a table? Like, I don't understand. I was like, they were like, okay, so you're talking about them being able to, like, we were talking about the martial artists, and they're like, well, do people get hurt? Like, no, and so we had a lot of education. But what I found was that we're actually not only sort of helping them make money on a franchise that has limited means to make money, meaning movies, but we're also solving a huge problem for them, which is what happens to your fan base between movie 1 and movie 2? How do you keep them engaged? And when I told them that I can write an adventure path for 200 pages, which can actually keep your fan base engaged for an entire year, then their ears perked up, right?
Yeah.
But I literally got to the point where they kept on saying, well, what are the pieces? And I kept on saying, this is it. This is all we do. And then I understand this is a novel, like it was a hard run, but I think once we actually got that to happen, I think doors started opening up.
Yeah, that's really cool. All I can think of is fan fiction. Like, it's like fan fiction, but with dice.
Like a choose your adventure.
Yes.
Yeah, see, as soon as you say dice, they're like, okay, so you're producing dice? No.
I mean, we could if you want us to, but...
Right, exactly. But I'll say that it's been really phenomenal working with the producers of these different licenses, partly because, like I mentioned to you earlier, we wanted to tell stories beyond the original. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. So The Crow was one that fell into our lap. We know that there's a huge following for The Crow, and we thought that there would be a great opportunity in order to create a game around it. But the problem is there's only one crow. So if you're a party of 5, what do? So we actually pitched the producers of The Crow while they're on set filming their next movie about this concept to expand the pantheon of death spirits from just The Crow to like 6 or 7. So we introduced the cat, the moth, the mastiff, all these creatures that have been set in mythology as creatures that ushered spirits from the present to the afterlife and brought them to life in this game with new mechanics. And when we presented this crazy idea to them, they were like, their mouths were open, and they're just like, "How do you guys think of this stuff?" And it was just mind expanding for them. Now, number one, but number two is that I think they're going to start using this in canon for future work, which is very exciting and rewarding for what we like to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've got a bunch of really impressive adventures already sort of completed, but what else? I know you must have stuff in the pipeline. What else can you tell us about that you have coming up?
Yeah, unfortunately not much at this point in time. But what I will tell you is we're actually going to be introducing a science fiction space fantasy line in the next couple of months. And then, of course, everyone's been asking for Urban Arcana. So we're putting the pieces together to launch Urban Arcana, as well as our military book. We've actually identified a lead developer for the military series. We're going to be excited to announce who that person is, who's very well known in this industry, hopefully in the next several months. So we're actually expanding our line very, very fast and very, very quickly. But in addition to that, we're always going to still stay faithful to the concept of the season pass of cinematic adventures. Next season, 2024, is going to be a little bit of a departure because season 1 was all stuff I just enjoyed. It's like here's my childhood in games. But I think we're going to take some risk in 2024, and I hope you guys like it. But we just don't want to keep doing the same sort of stuff. We want to sort of put an opportunity to do some relatively interesting and cutting edge type of adventures in place.
That's awesome.
Cool.
So you mentioned, obviously, you've got lead designers and game designers that are on your staff. Do you ever reach out and use like freelance writers, freelance artists, anything like that?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. We couldn't do it without our freelance artists and freelance writers. They're amazing. And I think, just to be very honest, organizations like Paizo and Cobalt Press have built have given a lot of artists and writers the opportunity to hone their skills, and get a chance to take advantage of that. So some of our favorite designers sort of came from those shops, we've given them an opportunity to blossom sort of in our world, and they've just done a really, really nice job.
That's awesome. How would somebody, if they were interested in freelancing for you, how would they reach out to you for that?
Well, so let's see here. There's a person not to be named who reads every single customer service email, responds to every single hiring inquiry.
That's the person named customer service, right?
Right, evil genius.
Yeah.
So I read every submission. One of the challenges is that we're small, so we don't have the ability to hire inexperienced writers. We're looking for people who can do things on their own. Paizo has the ability to have these line developers who actually really who break up projects and actually write the outline, stuff like that. We actually are looking for writers who can actually come up with their own proposal, their own treatment, and then can execute against that and have experience writing 10, 20, 30, 50,000 words. The whole reason why we did Escape from New York is because we had a freelancer go, hey, have you ever thought about doing Escape from New York? I'm a really big fan, and here's my pitch. And so then we were like, oh, cool. And then we took that pitch to the movie studio, and we're like, hey, would you let us do this? So, we love people, who have an idea or they're really passionate about something. And if they're passionate about it, we'll go and try to figure out a way to make it happen.
That's awesome.
Right. So what else can you tell us about Evil Genius that we haven't already asked you?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about sort of the genre breaking that we're trying to do. So we think that our games are more than just sort of this concept of the world itself. And if you read our stuff, you'll see that we're creating new mechanics in every single game. So our cinematic adventures are broken up into two halves. One is brand new rules and mechanics that can be taken in any 5e game. And then the other half is an adventure itself. So this concept around these death spirits and the class called the Reborn, you could actually go ahead and take that and put it into another 5e game, and it should work with a little bit of translation. Certainly you can put it in any Everyday Heroes game. So, if you're playing Rambo, you can certainly have a crow walking around the battlefield. Same thing with Highlander. If you have an immortal that you built in Highlander, why not throw them into your Ravenloft game 1 week, and then why not put them into a Jaeger and have them fight kaiju in Pacific Rim another week? I mean, they live forever, right?
And that feels very true to a Highlander anyway.
To a Highlander, right? They adjust, they adapt. So as a result, we try to be really flexible, and for that reason, I love sort of the area places we're going with stuff. My favorite cinematic adventure is Total Recall, and the reason is because after you watch that movie, you're left with so many questions. So question number one is okay, so Arnold Schwarzenegger's character finds this ancient Martian artifact, puts his hand on something, and the entire planet gets atmosphere in 3 seconds. I want to know more about that technology. I want to know more about the Martians that built that technology, and I want to know more about how his DNA was able to activate it. So we've taken that tiny, tiny thread, that 30-second thread, and we built out an entire world around it. That's the part I really love, and so the way we're expanding the stuff is just so fun and interesting that I think hopefully people will be able to play these worlds for years to come.
Awesome. I think that about does it for all of our questions. So,
yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
Where can people find you?
Pop over to www.evilgeniusgames.com. We've got a blog there. We've got a store. that's a great way to find us. And then of course we're on social media, Facebook and Twitter on Evil Genius Games, and we also have got a Discord. So we'd love to have a conversation with everybody and come on board and get involved.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you very much for hanging out with us for a little bit.
Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to talk about my number one passion in the world.
Yeah. Great.
Well,
and thank you all for tuning in. We will catch you all the next time we have a fun interview and really cool people to share with you all. So have a great rest of your day.